Hello and welcome back to FatbossTV. Today we're having a look at another 5-man dungeon. Blizzard seem to be pumping these out really quick. We're looking at Neltharion's Lair.
Yes, and this is Deathwing's old house. This is where he used to live before he turned into a tentacle monster and was a terrible end boss. What's happened is that the Drogbar, who worship old Deathwing, they've taken over the place, they've made it its capital, and they're getting all riled up, and you need to go in there and destroy them before everything goes horribly wrong. This is also a continuation of a quest chain in High Mountain. This is kind of where it ends, where you're kind of chasing one big Drogbar with an OP hammer, and you're kind of there to get him as well.
Now, when you first enter the dungeon, you find yourself looking down this absolutely gigantic gaping hole, and Rathian is here. I guess it's because it's his dad's house.
Yeah, he seems quite interested in it. He's in the High Mountain quest chain as well. He seems quite interested when people are fucking around with Deathwing, so he's kind of keeping an eye out on everything. But what happens is that he jumps down, and you got to follow him. You jump down after him, and you go down a water slide.
Yeah. The camera's a little bit bugged.
Yeah, but it's quite a fun way. It's a nice way to start the instance, especially because it lobs you out at the end, and then you just fall into a giant pit of water as well. It's like, oh, fuck, okay. And that's where you actually start making your way through the first trash.
So as you progress through this first part of the instance, you'll come across some scorpions and some crocodiles. They don't really have too many abilities. They just sort of throw random dots out. But when they die, they actually leave like this goo on the ground. So you do need to keep moving.
Because especially there's loads of little ads all over the place, and they die before the big ones, so you're just having to run around all over the place.
And it does tick pretty hard, and it also destroys your FPS a little bit.
Yeah, it does go down a tad.
You also come across some worms that will burrow and teleport away from you, as well as a mother and son Tectus. It looks like the mum's grooming it. It looks pretty cool.
It's so sweet, especially like you got to kill them. You do feel a little bit bad. They're not doing anything. They're just like, having a happy little time. You go over there and slaughter them on your quest for epic loot. But yeah, after that, you cross a bridge that doesn't have any collision at all. So you kind of fall through a bridge, and then you jump down a waterfall, and you fall into this giant cavernous first boss area.
Now, this boss is quite interesting because he has a passive where it makes it so every time you attack him, it spawns additional ads.
Yeah, and these ads are really annoying. They kind of don't really do anything, but when they die, similar to the Scorpion ads, they leave goo on the floor again. Luckily, this one doesn't really destroy your frame rate, but it does hurt a lot. And these ads spawn quite frequently, so what you got to do is try and pick them up as a tank, and that's quite annoying as well. So you're spending most of your time trying to pick up ads rather than, dealing with the actual boss.
And we're not quite sure the exact how the mechanic works, particularly with the ad spawning. We don't know if it's like percentage damage or number of hits or something, I don't know. But yeah, you do get quite a lot of them, and ultimately if you didn't kill them, you would probably be overrun pretty quickly.
Luckily, the boss does shatter. What will happen is he'll just slam on the ground, dealing damage to the group, but he'll also kill off all of these little skittery ads. So this ability is a nice thing when it happens. Most boss abilities is like, oh fuck, you gotta deal with it. This is just like, oh thank you. I don't have to try and pick up all these annoying ads anymore. But of course, be careful when they do die. You got the goo, so you gotta keep moving out of that.
And the other ability the guy has is Razor Shards. He will face the direction of a player and just send out a bunch of razors in that location. If you're hit, you take a little bit of damage. The damage from this ability is pretty low, and considering it's supposed to be like one of the big boy abilities, it's like one of the main abilities of the boss, it's probably not hitting hard enough. They could probably scale that up a little bit. Yeah. The boss generally, he looks amazing.
Yeah, he's a very cool
And that
model
passive's kind of interesting, but he didn't really have too many mechanics.
Now, it was a nice little first boss, I suppose. It kind of gets you used to the instance. But once again, after you kill him, you find 5 empty barrels right next to a river. And you can interact on them, and then you go full-on Hobbit style and go right down the river in these barrels. And I was in bear form, and it looked fucking stupid as hell. It was so good. Please don't change that, because it just looks so dumb. But yeah, you go downstream, and then at the end, you get thrown out, and you find yourself in another area full of Drogbars. Now, this trash isn't particularly hard. They've got like some shockwaves, and it's generally just move out of the bad for this trash. But there are loads of slaves all around, and they're asking for food, and they have a buff called Hungry. You can't do anything about it at all. They're even asking like their slave overlords, like, please give me a bit of food. And they're like, fuck off, back to work. And I was like, no. Oh, it feels so bad. One of the mobs that are part of this trash, what it can do is run over to some drums, and when it completes its cast on the drums, we assume it will just like spawn new ads or just like aggro a lot of stuff. We didn't let it go through because we weren't prepared to deal with that.
Yeah, maybe we should have seen that.
Yeah, but I'm scared of that stuff. I'm not happy when that sort of stuff goes off, so we killed it off nice and quickly.
Now, while you're progressing through this ravine-style area, there's actually multiple different like side caverns, but they are completely free of any mobs. They don't have anything in them whatsoever. While doing this instance, you'll see when we talk about it in just a moment, there is a rare boss that spawns, and it's not listed in the Dungeon Journal or anything like that. And we assume that maybe these areas may also be populated by rare mobs like every other time you go to the instance or something like that.
Yeah, maybe one of these side areas per time will have a rare mob. So it's worth like looking down there and seeing what's going on, but otherwise it's completely empty. There's nothing there, but they do look very cool.
There are also snails as you're moving through this instance. You'll actually see these snails when you're questing in High Mountain. And there's some Drogba cheering them on. I guess they haven't really got anything to do, so they decided to do snail racing as their sport.
It's pretty good. They move pretty fast, and they've got their own little names, and you can kill them as well, which, once again, this instance just makes you feel a little bit guilty. It's like the snails aren't doing anything wrong, but they do get caught up in AoE, so therefore they do have to die.
Once you've made your way through killing snails and ignoring slaves, you'll meet the second boss, which is Ularogg Cragshaper, which is probably the best boss in the instance.
Yeah, he is very, very cool. He's got a lot of like unique mechanics I haven't particularly seen before, so it was great fun fighting him. One mechanic that he can do is something called Strike of the Mountain. This will spawn a patch under 3 random players, and after a second or so, a fist will pop up and hit you for a fair amount of damage and knock you back. Throughout this entire fight, there's loads of patches all over the floor, and every single one of them is bad. So as a rule of thumb, we just found when fighting this boss, just move out of anything that looks like rumbly. Yeah. You'll probably be fine. Because what you'll also do is do something called Bellow of the Deeps. This will summon a couple of these bellowing idols. These idols don't really do anything, they just sit there, but they cause the roof to cave in certain locations. So once again, move out of rumbly, horrible areas, and if you do kill them off, the patches go away, so it is important that you do get them out of the encounter as soon as possible.
But the boss's unique ability is something called Stance of the Mountain. What the boss will do is jump into the middle of the room and spawn 3 idols and encase himself inside one of them, and this is where he now plays the street scam game of cups and balls on you.
Yeah.
All 3 idols will then just start switching all around the place, changing positions at really high speed, and what you need to do is track which one the boss initially went in, because after a couple of seconds, you can then attack the idols, and then you destroy one of them, and then the boss will come out. However, if it's the one the boss wasn't in, well, then he doesn't come out.
Yeah,
so
you
need
just
to find
keep
the right
finding
one.
them. Yeah,
it's so good.
It's a very cool mechanic, and the thing is, they are pretty buggy though, because each time they move, they suddenly like jolt a little bit and then start moving. So it's a little hard, like harder than it probably should be right now. Nobble was very good at it.
Yeah, I don't know why he was so good.
Like everyone else was like, no, it's this one. He was like, no, it's this one over here, and he absolutely nailed it. So yeah, if you don't find him though, the whole time there's loads of cave-ins going on. So once again, you do want to get out of this phase as soon as possible. So if you can keep a sharp eye and play this scam of cups and balls and win, you do get rewarded. It's quite nice. I think like what they could do to make this boss maybe a little bit better is that if you get the wrong one, maybe you get punished a little bit, so maybe it would take a little bit of AoE damage or something. Nothing too bad, but maybe just like a little punishment, like an ad spawning or something. But yeah, very, very cool. And he'll do this a couple of times and then eventually fall over. It's a very cool boss.
After you killed him off, you go through some more Drogbars, some more snails, and even more side rooms. And this is at the point that we realised that it was a rare mob. Well, Nobble did, he saw it on the minimap. We was actually going to skip him, we didn't even realise. So we went down towards him, you just sort of go through like this rivery area, this stream. This boss that we found, like we said, he's not in the dungeon journal, and he wasn't scaled properly. He was actually level 110, while the rest of the instance was scaled to 100. So you got like 2-shot, you died really, really quick. Wasn't really expecting that. But we did manage to like kite him around a bit. We saw a few of his abilities, but nothing was substantial. It was all more or less just single target damage, and that was it.
Yeah, exactly. I think the whole idea of these is it's like a treasure that you can find, and if you kill it, it might give you an extra bit of loot or something, which are really nice, especially if it changes once every single time that you go in there, and that's like a nice little optional extra thing that you can do. But yeah, hopefully they don't one-shot you when you actually do it on live servers. So after wiping to this crocodile for far too long, we decided to keep going on with the rest of the instance, and you find yourself moving down a narrow corridor with loads of Drogbar spectators on the ledges around the side, and this is where you'll fight the next boss, Naraxas, which is like a giant shadowy worm Magmor lookalike, and it's very, very cool. The main ability she has is something called Spiked Tongue. This will pick a random player and deal damage to them, and each time she like eats a player, she'll gain a 10% damage increase that will stack up. But this ability was a little bit buggy. Like one time it dragged a ranged player halfway towards her, another time it knocked a melee player away. I think what we can assume is going to happen is that she will like pick you up and nom on you a little bit like Magmor did in Blackwing Descent, and then just spit you out and you continue. But yeah, that ability animation wasn't really working too well, but that's the idea, and the idea is that if the fight goes on too long, she'll get a giant damage increase and everything will hurt a hell of a lot more. She'll also be spawning a bunch of goo in melee that will hurt if you stand in the goo patches. This is a little bit irritating, but there is always a spot around her that the tank and the melee DPS can stand in. You just got to really keep on your toes because it does come in quite frequently and the patches do change, so make sure you are focusing on that.
On top of this, throughout the fight, ads will constantly be jumping down into the arena from the sides. And these ads don't do a hell of a lot, they'll just do damage to random targets. But importantly, they will fixate people. To deal with these fixates, the boss does something called Rance's Maw. The boss will target a few players and then just spit a bit of goo at them. And if you kite the ads over the top of this goo, they get rooted and eventually they'll just die off. But one thing to note about this goo is that it's completely different to the goo that actually spawns in melee.
Yeah, sometimes you might think, oh, it might be hard, there's so much goo about, but the goo that's you can root the ads in is like really dense and quite vibrant green color, where the other goo in melee is quite like...
It's like a misty wave more than anything
exactly.
else, yeah.
So you can tell them apart, but make sure you do, because otherwise you'll just be dragging it around and it won't be doing anything.
So this boss really, I mean, of course, the main ability was bugged.
So that didn't really help out,
So that didn't really help, but yeah, the kiting mechanic's pretty interesting, I guess.
And it does go in a frenzy when it reaches like 20%. It gets like an attack speed buff, so you are kind of like, oh shit, we've got to kill it off nice and quickly. But one of the coolest things is that after you kill her, you actually go down the hole that she was like occupying in order to get to the next area. And Rathian looks down there and he's like, I ain't doing that. So you kind of jump down and you find yourself in a brand new area. And like throughout the most of the instance, you're kind of like, it's like quite watery, it's quite dark, and it's like a lot of blue colors. You move into this area and it's full of lava and it's all red, and you got loads of these bone structures everywhere of all these old dragons and all that kind of stuff. It's a really, really neat looking area. After clearing out the trash, which mainly involves fighting rocky Drogbar that kind of transform into rock giants, and some Drogbar surfing on top of fire scorpions, they're pretty easy to deal with. You then get to fight the last boss, which is Dargrul, the Underking.
So this guy has 5 abilities in total, but the way that 3 of them interact with each other is the most important part of the fight. The other 2 abilities, basically what he does, he just spawns these magma sculptors. They just fixate on a target, they go towards the target, they just start doing melee damage and shit. They have very little health. They could probably be scaled up a lot better, to be honest. They probably need more health because they just die off so quickly.
Yeah, the idea is that each time that they walk, like they stomp so hard it does damage to random players, but they never moved for us. They literally died, like instantly. Everyone switched to them and they like fell over. So hopefully that can be increased a little bit.
And the other ability is Molten Crash. This is just a cast that is aimed at the tank that deals some damage, and if the tank doesn't have any active mitigation up, the tank will be knocked away a pretty far distance. The idea is don't get knocked away so you don't piss off your entire group.
And land in the lava.
And land in the lava, because otherwise, yeah, no one's going to be able to reach and you're probably going to die. The main abilities are Crystal Wall. How this works is that the boss will just target a player and you'll get a circle around you that you need to move out of, because a couple of seconds later, a massive wall will appear out of it. And importantly, this wall creates line of sight. It's an actual physical wall. However, the tank can't be too close to this wall because of landslide. This is yet again another ability that's aimed at the tank that just creates a massive shockwave. It deals quite a lot of damage. It doesn't knock you back as far as the other ability, but it still knocks you back. If the shockwave hits the rocks, it'll actually crumble them away and they'll be removed from the fight. And you want to keep these rocks up because of Magma Wave. This is a relatively long cast that just deals an absolutely disgusting amount of damage to all players within line of sight of the boss. So the idea is, as soon as the boss starts casting this ability, hopefully you have some walls up because you haven't destroyed them, you hide behind them, the cast goes off, no one takes any damage whatsoever.
Yeah, and at that point, the walls will then be destroyed, so then you need to generate new walls again. That's the whole idea of the boss. You just keep rotating that thing around. Quite annoyingly, that the crystal walls, if they're like somewhat near the boss, even if the landslide doesn't hit them, like the animation doesn't hit them, the walls can still crumble every now and then. So that's, you've got to be careful with that. You've got to make sure the boss is away.
You really do have to tank the boss pretty far, like 20 yards plus away from the
just to make sure they're
walls,
fine.
Which is, I guess, a little bit irritating. My only complaint about the boss is that the Magma Wave doesn't one-shot.
Yeah, it is normal mode, though. On Heroic, it might
Sure,
be.
it is only normal mode, but, like, considering it's, like, the ability...
I think it punishes
and all the other
hard
mechanics
enough.
work with it, which is great. I love it when they sort of make it so all the mechanics work together in different ways. I think that's brilliant. But yeah, it would have been nice if it one-shot.
Maybe it'll do that on a higher difficulty, but I think on normal mode, I think it punishes you hard enough. But yeah, that's the entire instance. Once you kill him off, Rathian's there, and he's just like, oh, okay, cool. I'm gonna go do something suspicious now, and then he just fucks off, and then that's the dungeon. It's a really good dungeon. I absolutely love it. Like,
yeah,
the bosses themselves, some of them are really cool. They've got some really unique mechanics, like the whole ball in a cup sort of thing was probably my favourite part.
Oh, I thought that was brilliant, yeah.
But it's mainly the setting, and especially how you move around the setting. Like, you got a water slide, and then you got this whole bit where you're like jumping down a wormhole, and then you're in the barrels with the bear, and it's really good, and it looks amazing, and it does tell quite a lot of a story without like text boxes. Like, you learn a little bit about the Drogbar society and how they like to raise snails and how they're not feeding their slaves properly, and even seeing the Tector's mum and the Tector's baby. It's like they put a lot of thought into it. Like, little touches are really nice, and the instance just looks beautiful. It's really, really good.
Also, what's really great about this instance is how things change. You go through different areas, you go through like a dark cave area, and then you sort of go into a water area, you get to see the streams, the underwater rivers and everything, and then you finally go into like the lava area right at the end. I like how the instance changes, and it feels massive. And this ravine area with a massive building in the middle and everything like that, it just looks spectacular. You want to explore this place.
Yeah.
It's just that vast. It just looks incredible.
And all these little side areas that are kind of empty at the moment, maybe they'll be adding in rare mobs. I think it'd be really good if they did, because farming like the same dungeon over and over, it does eventually get boring no matter how good it is. But if they did add these little things that change every single time, I think that would be like a nice little touch. It'll keep
And the
you on
thing
your
is,
toes.
because they are in those side areas, if you don't want to kill them, and then you don't have to, they
can
have
just
no
skip it.
impact on your instance unless you actually want to go do them.
Yeah, so it's a nice little extra choice if you
Yeah.
want to be extra adventurous.
But thank you very much for watching, guys. If you did enjoy this little preview, then please do drop us down a like. It helps us out a lot. And we'll see you in the next one.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.